Hey guys, it's Rift here, and today we're going to be reviewing and responding to why The Amazing Spider-Man is amazingly bad. Now, this was made by Lowart a year ago, and I actually enjoyed this video. I've already watched it, and I think it was a pretty decent video, even if he did get a few things wrong. But we will get all into that in due time. If you like more videos like this, feel free to subscribe, all the good stuff down below. That'd be great. Now let's get into it.
I hate The Amazing Spider-Man. From the first time I saw it in theaters, I've thought that it's boring, bland, and incredibly forgettable. However, after rewatching the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, I still wanted to give it another chance.
I would agree that as an origin story, it falls short compared to the original Spider-Man, but is it really that bad? Well, I guess we're gonna find out.
So, has my opinion on it? No, it didn't change. I still hate this movie. So buckle your seatbelts, feed your pets, and hug your children, because this is why The Amazing Spider-Man is amazingly bad.
Buckle up, bitches, it's gonna be a bumpy ride.
Now, I don't hate everything about this movie. In fact, the whole first chunk of the film is totally fine. It does a solid job of establishing this version of Peter and making him easy to root for. See, where Raimi's Spider-Man was a bullied kid, this Peter is the kid who tries to stop bullies. Of course, that whole underdog angle was what made it easy to care about this version of Peter, but The Amazing Spider-Man offers a good enough reason to care about this Peter's struggles. He was abandoned by his parents, and despite his great relationship with his aunt and uncle, it's something that eats at him. Then there's Uncle Ben and Aunt May, who are good here too. They have some nice banter, and they clearly care about Peter a lot.
You see what I mean, guys? This video is actually pretty good so far, and he does make some legitimately great points. I've honestly nothing to respond to here. He basically sums up the first part of the movie perfectly. Take notes, Ultimate Joker. This is what happens when you review something in a non-biased way.
They feel like a pretty believable family group that needs each other. I even enjoy how this movie handles Peter's discovery of his superpowers, with how he accidentally beats up these people on the train in an incredibly goofy moment. It's fun and silly, and I'm down for that. Meanwhile, when he wakes up and can't seem to get through his morning routine without destroying the house, it's not only funny, but it's also a good way of showing that his life is permanently changed, and how freaky it would be to suddenly have these abilities.
Again, I've got nothing to respond to here, and I would also like to point out that when I watched this section, it actually opened my eyes and made me appreciate the first part of the film all the more. Really just goes without saying. Sometimes when you watch a film a second time, or if you listen to someone else's perspective with a fresh pair of eyes, you can honestly learn something that you didn't know before.
All this is to say that, yes, this Peter is definitely different from the one I and many others were first acquainted with. But there's nothing inherently wrong with that. There's plenty of room for different interpretations of this character, and I quite like many of the early scenes here. But then, with one moment, the whole movie starts to fall apart. See, at this point, Peter has started helping Dr. Connors with his research. However, this leads to Peter making an innocent mistake. He forgets to pick up his aunt from work, even though he promised Ben that he would.
Except that this wasn't an honest mistake. Peter, at this point in the film, had sought out Dr. Connors because of the research that he and his father had done in the past. He provides him with the equation which makes Dr. Connors invite him to Oscorp after school that day. Peter's antics at school that day force Ben to change his shifts, meaning that he lets Peter know well in advance that he has to pick up Aunt May later on that day. And when he's at Oscorp, Ben texts him and reminds him that he needs to pick up Aunt May, which Peter willingly ignores. He didn't make a mistake, he made a decision, and that decision had consequences. The way that I interpret this scene is like this. By prioritizing his work over his family, Peter made a choice to be willingly like his father, which actually makes sense because at this point in the film, he is actively seeking out information about his father. But later on, Peter makes the decision to, understandably, choose family over everything else, meaning that he would be more like Ben Parker in a sense. That's how I interpret the scene. Let me know what you guys think down below.
Ben does not like this, which is fine. Totally makes sense that he'd be upset. What doesn't feel so natural to me is that his reaction is so extreme that it leads to him invoking Peter's father's words of wisdom about responsibility, which is, of course, this film's version of that famous quote. Now, before this section, there's been a sort of silence surrounding Peter's parents, the sense that Ben and May would rather not talk about it too much for some reason. So it feels pretty strange when Ben invokes these words here for what, to me, feels like a relatively minor misstep.
The reason why Uncle Ben was likely so pissed is because he saw that Peter did exactly what, Richard Parker did. He prioritized his work over his family, which ultimately led to them cutting them off completely, which is why they don't want to talk about his parents in front of Peter. When Uncle Ben sees this, it likely pissed him off because he didn't want Peter to go down that same route.
Like, I would expect Ben to whip out these words if he found out that Peter had done something truly awful, not when he simply forgot something.
Again, he didn't forget to pick Aunt May up. He willingly ignored it in favor of working with Dr. Connors at Oscorp. He made a choice, and that choice comes with consequences, which he is now facing.
It also doesn't help that we as the audience know that Peter was actually trying to do a good thing here by helping Connors. You know, aiding him in his research that could save plenty of people and even grow back Connors' own arm. Because of this, there's this obvious miscommunication looming over the conversation. He's feeling that if Ben would just calm down for a second, maybe Peter could explain. But no, Ben's angry because we need to get to that responsibility line now.
I don't agree with this at all, because if Peter brought up that he ignored Aunt May just to stay at the lab more, if anything, it would piss off Ben further, because that's exactly what his brother did. That's exactly what Richard Parker did, and that is why, you know, they don't want to talk about them. If anything, it wouldn't have improved matters, it would have just made them worse.
This is made so much worse when Peter, understandably, gets upset that Ben threw his father's words at him. And Ben strikes with, "Oh, come on, how dare you?" I don't know, Ben. I think I'm on Peter's side here. This seems like a big overreaction. And in my opinion, all of this means that the film has absolutely butchered this pivotal scene.
I don't really know how, because it does parallel the Tobey Maguire scene with Uncle Ben, where in that scene, he gets reprimanded for using his power in the wrong way, or in other words, living his life in the wrong way. With great power comes great responsibility. In the Amazing Spider-Man scene, Ben is essentially berating Peter that just because he has these abilities and these fantastic gifts, he has the moral obligation to do the right thing, not choice, responsibility. It's exactly the same scene, just with different context.
But then we move to a far worse moment where Peter, after storming out of the house, goes to a convenience store, but doesn't have enough money to buy his chocolate milk. The store clerk tells him he can't buy it. So, because Peter is annoyed, he turns the other way when the guy behind him robs the clerk and whoa, he even tosses Pete the milk. What a bro. Anyway, then he leaves. The store clerk asks Peter for help. Of course, Peter doesn't. But, oh no, Uncle Ben! He's across the street. He sees the guy drop the gun, so he tries to grab it, and in the struggle, he's shot it. Oh wow, Ben is dead. Why? What did he die for? Well, he died for chocolate milk.
Right, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, Uncle Ben did not die for chocolate milk. He died looking for Peter to make sure he was safe. Peter stormed off from the house and went God knows where. It's understandable as a parent figure, he would go look for him. Also, Peter in this scene essentially does what Peter does in the Tobey Maguire films. He gets cheated out of something, in this case chocolate milk, and in Tobey's case it was the $3,000, and funnily enough, he's a dick in that moment, and out of wanting to get revenge, he turns a blind eye, which unfortunately leads to him also ignoring Uncle Ben being shot until the gunshot goes off. Peter had no idea what was going to happen. Uncle Ben didn't die for nothing. He died trying to do the right thing.
Now, this might sound a little facetious, like I'm phrasing it stupidly so it sounds dumber than it is, but this is really what this moment comes down to for me. Whenever I watch it, I can't help but think that Uncle Ben just died for chocolate milk.
I don't understand this point, because by that logic, Uncle Ben died in the 2002 film just because of the $3,000. Like, I don't understand.
However, the film could still make this work. Maybe we could focus on Peter grappling with his feelings of guilt after such a small moment led to this. Like maybe later, Peter could have a conversation with Gwen, and he could grieve not only over the fact that Ben is dead, but also that he died for something so meaningless. But no, we never do that.
You're joking, right? There's like a long-ass montage of Peter grieving. How he fights Flash, how he rejects a hug from Gwen, how he sits by himself in his room crying over his phone, how him and May are clearly torn apart by this, and how it leads to arguments between them. There's a long-ass montage of him struggling. If anything, this film gives more attention to detail on this than the Tobey Maguire film did.
Instead, this moment is brushed under the rug, and we move along. Now, I don't want to act like Raimi's films are the only good way to do things. They aren't. But still, it's impossible for me to watch this without directly comparing it to that version. That version was so much better. The thing Peter had stolen from him, the $3,000 he had rightfully earned, it clearly meant something to him. And so it made total sense why he let the thief leave after the fact. In fact, it seemed reasonable to do so. Why would he help this guy who just cheated him?
I would agree that the Tobey Maguire version was better, and it's got nothing to do with comic accuracy or any of this shit, but at the end of the day, these are two completely different adaptations of the character, because as far as I'm aware at least, in the Tobey Maguire films, Peter's parents aren't mentioned once, and this clearly doesn't affect him. Or at the very least, it's not shown on screen and it's not talked about. These are different adaptations of the character, where in the Amazing Spider-Man film, his parents have a great impact in the story, especially in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, when we get that conversation from Richard Parker.
However, once that guy killed Uncle Ben, his mistake became clear. This was about it being irresponsible to let a man with a gun just run off after threatening people. This was about the very thing his uncle had told him to consider: power and responsibility. And that versus chocolate milk? Well, things aren't looking so good for Peter's chocolate milk, I'll say that much.
All I'm gonna say on the topic is it's pretty clear which version he prefers at least, and it's also pretty clear which version I prefer. But saying that chocolate milk is like the cause and like he's acting as though fucking the chocolate milk caused like riots or some shit. Like, no, the chocolate milk had nothing to do with it. What sparked this entire thing was the anger that Peter felt with Ben bringing up his parents, which he himself also brings up, which obviously led to him storming off and needing time to himself. The chocolate milk was just something he fancied buying and obviously drinking. Like, maybe he likes chocolate milk, maybe it's a coping mechanism for him, I don't fucking know.
Still, if this whole Uncle Ben's death thing was just one major misstep, I could see the movie being enjoyable. Sure, it would still be marred by this moment, but hey, I can look past some mistakes. There are even a couple scenes I enjoy after this too, like Peter building his Spider-Man stuff and Flash saying he's sorry about Peter's uncle. But, unfortunately, I don't think the film ever fully recovers. Nah, this whole thing with Ben just revealed how the rest of this movie is going to play out, and the bizarre ways it will push the plot forward in unsatisfying directions.
I will say right now that they should not have cut the deleted scenes from this film. Honestly, if they included the deleted scenes, like where Connors is speaking to his kid or Peter is talking to Connors like mid-transformation, I think that this film would easily be in everyone's top 5 favorites. But without the scenes, the film does suffer, I will say that much.
The first of these unsatisfying plots I really hate: Peter's quest for revenge. See, Peter's primary motivation for becoming Spider-Man in this film is that he wants to avenge Uncle Ben's death. Helping people and catching criminals is clearly secondary to that, since he's only going after people who could match Ben's killer's description. This is another one of those things that some people don't like. My Spider-Man isn't a revenge man, you know, that sort of thing.
Peter gets the costume pretty early on, although it's also pretty obvious that he doesn't become Spider-Man and the character traits that embodies the character until the bridge scene when he saves Jack and reunites a little lost boy with his father, the one thing that Peter can never experience. We also get a scene afterwards where he's just sat on the floor staring at the mask. It's pretty obvious that that scene hints that that is the moment where he truly becomes Spider-Man, especially since that's his first encounter with the Lizard, and not long after the sewer fight, he has a conversation with Gwen saying how he has to stop Connors and that is his responsibility. It's pretty obvious he becomes Spider-Man truly on later in the film.
But once again, I don't really care. I understand why the Spider-Man wants revenge, and I believe that he would go out and try to get it. But here's the problem. The plotline never reaches a proper conclusion. It just gets dropped. That's right. This Spider-Man's main reason for becoming Spider-Man and his desire to do something about Ben's killer just vanishes as other things become more important to the plot. Now, there is an implicit reason given for this, though. After all, when he has dinner with Gwen's family, he and her dad talk about how Spider-Man's been actually messing things up for the police. By the end, there's this sense that Peter realizes that he's been doing this for the wrong reasons.
Okay, so you contradicted your entire point then, since you claim that the side plot has no satisfying conclusion, but you also admit that in the dinner scene, Peter realizes that he's been doing this for the wrong reasons, and surely that is the reason why that subplot is dropped. And funnily enough, immediately after the dinner scene is the bridge where he saves Jack, and also later on, you have the sewer fight where Peter pretty much is welded into his character the themes of responsibility at this point. At this point in the film, at the dinner scene, Peter is still consumed by revenge, and it's only afterwards where he drops the subplot and fully embodies the character of Spider-Man.
But this is a pretty small moment, and little focus is placed on him outright abandoning his goal at this point. To me, this is just a case where it feels like the film didn't consider its own plot. What I mean is that, sure, I guess Spider-Man shouldn't be focused on revenge, but after we've placed this much emphasis on it, I want to see an actual conclusion to this arc, something that feels definitive and emotional. Like, imagine how much more satisfying it would be for Peter to capture the killer, get ready to harm them or even kill them, but then he recalls Ben's words and realizes that this would be wrong. That way he could take him to the police because, yes, it's still not okay for this guy to just be out and about. He's still a dangerous murderer. So yeah, it feels like the movie just forgot about this, and as such, one of its most major plot points never reaches a remotely satisfying conclusion.
I disagree with the notion that this side plot had no conclusion at all, because it's pretty clear that it does. However, I do actually agree with his, theory, and I think that if this theoretical scene that he's describing was in the film, it would have made the film 10 times better. Like, holy shit, let this guy cook. He just described something awesome. Like, not only would it provide a bit of character finality or development for Peter, but it could also potentially it could also make the police chief see Peter in a different light. It's a shame that we never got that in the film. Kind of a recurring theme with The Amazing Spider-Man 1, all the best shit gets cut from it.
But the main thing that sidelines this plot? Well, that's the lizard, which Dr. Connors turns into after getting backed into a corner by his Oscorp overlords and using his serum on himself. And once he realizes that this formula definitely isn't ready for human testing because, he's turning into a lizard, well, he rushes out to stop this Oscorp guy that was ready to begin some illegal human trials. However, Spider-Man saves him, along with the other people the lizard attacks on the branch. And what happens with Mr. Human Trials following this? Nothing. He vanishes. I feel like I'm starting to notice a pattern here.
This is a good point, actually. I'm really pissed off that this deleted scene also got deleted, where, Lizard fully transforms, whoops Peter's ass, and then kills the guy. I think that would have been a satisfying payoff, but it got deleted. What can I tell you?
Then, instead of the lizard's motivation centering around stopping Oscorp from misusing his research, he decides that he wants to turn everyone into lizards because it's good for them or something. He's going crazy, I guess. It's like he has a second side of his brain that's telling him that he needs to get this done and that this is what's best for the world.
I mean, yeah, he's going insane. We even get a couple of scenes where he's standing in front of a fucking camera, like trying to sell the effects of the serum as if he's like a tradesperson selling a product. He mentions how his eyesight is improved and that subjects no longer require lenses. There's even a moment later on in the film where it's clear his insanity has progressed and he says, "Why would you even want to be human at all? What I'm offering you is a gift. You can be stronger, smarter, faster, better than ever." He's clearly going downhill in terms of the brain department.
There's this sort of focus on perfection from him, like turning into a lizard will make other people more whole and help them. This is a bit of a strange change in trajectory for his character, but I could see it working. Connors does want his arm back after all, and seems to view himself as incomplete without it. So this definition of completeness that he has in mind, maybe that could lead him down some strange paths as his mental state deteriorates.
I've genuinely nothing to add to that because he just described what the movie was going for. He wants to feel whole, and obviously insanity is one of the drawbacks to the lizard formula. So yeah, I've nothing to add to this. Connors does indeed have a mental decline, showing that this theme of being whole and complete takes hold of his character and leads him to want to turn humanity into lizards.
In fact, I think that's what the movie's going for, but my issue is that we don't focus on that nearly enough. There are really just a couple shots where we see longing from him about his arm, a couple times where it gets mentioned. Other than that, not so much.
Again, we did actually get all this shit that he's describing in the deleted scenes, which makes me want to ask, why the fuck were they deleted? They literally made him a far better villain, yet they were cut for some reason.
And really, that goes for him in general. I haven't seen much of him. All I can say about this version of Connors is that he seems like a good guy who wants to use his research to help people. I haven't seen anything about him to make me personally care about this guy or his possibly tragic fate. It's all too surface level. There are other questions that rise to the surface surrounding him too. For example, how is Oscorp reacting to this? While they don't know Connors is the lizard, they should still do something when they see that this rat is a big boy, or when they learn that one of their own was randomly attacked by a giant lizard.
This is a fair point. Obviously, the deleted scenes show that Oscorp executive was indeed killed, but in the base film, he just disappears, so yeah, I can imagine how that would be a plot hole. The only reasoning that I can think of is that in the film, Connors mentions how he gave everyone the week off so that he can, obviously he doesn't tell Peter that he's doing suspicious shit, but like, he does give everyone the week off, but who exactly does that constitute to? I'm assuming he's referring to other scientists, because surely he doesn't have the authority to give, like, executives the week off, you know what I mean? But it does at least make it a bit plausible that he's able to do some of this under Oscorp's nose, if that makes sense.
Obviously, this would be a bit tangential to the film's plot as it exists now, but that's exactly the problem. The film is all too quick to ignore concepts it's already set up in favor of doing something different that it wanted to do. As such, this plot isn't snowballing, isn't naturally developing and becoming more intense. It's more like random ideas are getting tossed into the mix. Like we have a revenge plot, then the Oscorp guy, then Oscorp's general reaction. And all of it is written out because eventually it's revealed that this wasn't the story we were actually telling. It leads to an exceptionally directionless movie.
Again, they should have just kept the deleted scenes. If they did that, then this would be one of everyone's favorites. But, you know, it is what it is, I guess.
Beyond all of this, though, there's the lizard's connection to Peter. You know, how he functions as a meaningful villain for our hero. What he represents to Peter, what he means for the movie. Ideally, there would be a personal connection between them, and yes, there actually is. After all, Peter gave him the formula that made this possible, so now he feels responsible. Alright, so we're coming back to that responsibility thing from Ben now. Cool. However, unfortunately, this connection wasn't nearly enough for me. Don't get me wrong, it's a good start, but my issue is that, in my mind, Peter isn't really to blame for this, or at least not enough if this is going to be the primary way they connect. The real guy who caused this is the Oscorp human testing dude who got written out of the movie. Now, that's not to say I'm blaming Peter for feeling responsible. I know I would if I were in his shoes. But we as the audience have more information than him.
Again, he raises really good points, and the only thing I can reply is they should have just kept the fucking deleted scenes, because the scene that he is wanting was included there, where Peter in his Spider-Man suit is having a chat with Connors mid-transformation, reassuring his friend that, he's gonna be okay. But Connors raises a good question to Peter. He's like, would you really want to go back to being human after all the power you feel and everything? It has more of a connection between the two, and it's so annoying that these scenes were cut because they were almost there.
As such, I know what really happened, and I know that Peter isn't as responsible as he thinks he is. This way, the emotions behind Peter's decisions, behind his drive to help people and save the city, they don't feel all that strong to me. Whatever. Why do I even care anymore? The lizard is such a nothing villain to me. But we still have Peter himself. How's his characterization and arc throughout the film? Well, we've already established that his revenge got sidelined and that I didn't find his relationship with the lizard compelling, so that's not good. However, there is more to his character. For example, he has this nice scene where he rescues this kid, and that comes back later when the crane operators help him. Personally, I found this part a bit cloying and on the nose, but if you found it powerful, fair enough.
Yeah, I did really like this part, especially since it reminded me of the Tobey Maguire 2002, where the people of New York band together to save Peter from the Goblin. It kinda reminds me of that. It also reminds me of the Spider-Man PS4 thing. You help one person, you help everyone. Obviously, this was made years before that game came out, but it's not too far-fetched to draw parallels between them.
Otherwise, the main elements of his character revolve around his relationship with Gwen. Now, this romance starts off strong. They have a lot of chemistry and cute banter together, and it was just really easy to get invested in them as a pair. But honestly, I'm not really a fan of where it goes. See, after Peter gets in an argument with Gwen's father at a family dinner, he reveals to her that he's Spider-Man. In the end then, he and her father work together, but he's injured, and in his last breaths, he makes Peter promise to leave his daughter alone because he'll make too many enemies and she'll be in danger. And sure enough, Peter distances himself from Gwen. However, she's still able to figure out that her father made him promise this, and she hates the idea that she can't be with Peter because of her father. It shouldn't be his choice. Fair enough, I'm still with you. But then Aunt May assures Peter that he is good and that he should be able to have a relationship with her. And finally, he listens to the voicemail Uncle Ben left for him. The voicemail itself, I don't like it. The voiceover for it is incredibly dry and stilted, and the words feel real weird given that Ben didn't know Peter was Spider-Man. Like the way he's talking, the words he's choosing, they feel totally out of place from where Ben was in the story.
If anything, it shows how Peter has developed as a character, how earlier on in the film he was selfish and neglected his family, yet with all the development he received in the film, granted, some of the development was cut, but the development that he still had, he's willing to push Gwen away to keep her safe. It's the responsible thing to do. Like, he does indeed make a good choice here. It's just a shame that he doesn't keep that choice by the end of the film and it ultimately leads to her death. But I did enjoy their romance. It was pretty enjoyable to see and they clearly have good chemistry. I don't think it was nearly as bad as you are describing. Also, I do kind of agree the dialogue that Uncle Ben does give is a little bit forced, but I feel like that's not the point. The point is that Peter couldn't bring himself to listen to it earlier on in the film, whether it's out of shame, guilt, or whatever, but at the end of the film, he's moved past that, he's become a stronger character, and he can finally bring himself to listen to the voicemail. I think that was more so the point of the scene, rather than the dialogue itself.
Once again, it seems like the characters are more so saying things that fall in line with the typical movie moment, rather than actually being their own characters and being genuine. Whatever though, the moment I truly hate comes here, when Peter arrives late to class and promises it won't happen again. The teacher tells him he shouldn't make promises he can't keep. Peter, now sitting behind Gwen, leans forward and whispers to her, "Yeah, but those are the best kind." What? Peter! That's messed up! Now, I'm not inherently opposed to him disregarding this promise to Gwen's dad and deciding to be with her. At the end of the day, this could be his and Gwen's decision. But saying it like this, it's just so cruel, like he's spitting on her father's grave.
I agree in a sense, like maybe they should have had a conversation or something in the second film, but I feel like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I don't think it's awful, but I do think they should have gone about it differently. And ultimately, this decision leads to dire consequences in Spider-Man 2, where he gets Gwen killed unintentionally, and in No Way Home, where he finally gets a little bit of redemption. So, in a way, this scene did lead to something greater.
Then the music soars as he swings through the city after saying this, as though this was his big hero moment. But it's not. What does this have to do with responsibility with the other words from Uncle Ben that we just heard? Frankly, I don't know what this movie is about anymore, and that's exactly the problem. At times, it can be so on the nose with its themes and lessons, and yet, at the end of the day, I don't think it really has anything to consistently say.
Again, if it just had a little bit more time in the oven and if a couple of scenes weren't deleted, I think this film would have been amazing. But unfortunately, I do agree with him. This film has really good moments, but ultimately it kind of comes off as being kind of bland. It could have been fantastic, but some of the most important scenes were cut, unfortunately.
Which could be fine if I found other elements of the film satisfying, but I don't. From Ben's crappy death, to drop plot points, to a villain I don't care about, to Peter doing this, I think all of it is amazingly bad. And this is easily my least favorite Spider-Man movie I've had to watch thus far.
Yeah, but is it really that bad? Like, if it's your least favorite, I can totally relate, because at the end of the day, I have pretty controversial takes myself. But is it really worse than TASM 2? Or is it really worse than Homecoming or Far From Home? Like, at the very least, the plot is pretty consistent. Unlike TASM 2, which throws loads of shit at the wall in the hopes that it sticks. Or in the case of the MCU films, which constantly is inconsistent with how they treat Peter's character. Like, is the film really that bad? I mean, fair enough. Like, I definitely don't agree with that, but maybe some people in the comments will agree with it, who knows. But anyways, guys, that's all from me for today. If you like the response, feel free to subscribe and like the video, all that good stuff, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day, guys.